Welcome back to Vintage Camera Digest. I'm Stephen Broom, and today we're going back to the year 1975 to take a close look at the Pentax K2, the short-lived flagship camera of the then brand new K-mount series. More to come. As the early 1970s rolled around, Asahi Pentax found itself in a rather unenviable spot. After a decade of producing the popular Spotmatic camera series and other fine cameras before that, they had gone about as far as they could with the M42 lens mount. The M42 mount could be considered by some to be a universal mount. Several manufacturers used it on their cameras, and third-party lens makers produced a rather large number of lenses to choose from, in addition to those from major brands. Those lenses were everywhere. But as camera makers began incorporating new technologies into their systems, the M42 mount began to show its age. Many of Pentax's competitors were proving their own success with proprietary bayonet lens mounts, and the bayonet mount would be the wave of the future, if for no other reason but the ease of changing lenses. With the M42 lens mount, it takes 3.5 rotations to take the lens off, and of course, the same to put back on. The bayonet lens mount, however, can be removed and put back in about 1/4 of a turn, if that much. So Pentax decided it was time to evolve, and this evolution resulted in a collaboration with Zeiss to produce the K bayonet mount. I think their hope for this new mount was for it to become like the M42 mount, another universal mount. And some camera makers did adopt it as such, but Zeiss would soon pull out of the camera market, and as I mentioned earlier, there were plenty of Pentax competitors who by this time were already experiencing success with their own bayonet mount. And while it didn't become a new world standard, it did open the door to a fantastic lineage of cameras that are still popular. The first three K-mount cameras out of the gate were the automatic KM, the advanced KX, and the K2, the flagship of the lineup. And this is a rather odd group because other than the new bayonet mount, the cameras were quite different from each other. The K2, for example, has an electronically controlled metal vertical travel shutter capable of a fast, for the time, flash sync of 1/125th of a second. The other two cameras use a traditional cloth horizontal travel type shutter that syncs at 160. The K2 also features a film speed setting dial surrounding the lens mount, which is at best a bit fiddly to operate, and probably accounts for most of the bad press you'll ever hear in reference to this camera. The other two cameras, however, just went with the old standard way of setting film speeds. Maybe this design was sort of a test to see if it could be something to incorporate on future models. If that is the case, it certainly failed. Thankfully. Another oddity on the K2 is the lack of a periscope window on the prism housing to allow the chosen aperture to be shown in the viewfinder. The KX, however, the camera in the middle of the lineup, did have it. It's all sort of odd, but maybe Pentax was just throwing around a bunch of ideas to see what would stick. I don't know. But anyway, let's look at the controls of the camera. On the top right shoulder of the camera, we have the shutter speed dial with settings for 1/1000th of a second all the way down to 8 seconds, plus B and automatic, which is what you'll use when in aperture priority mode. One of the coolest features of the K2 is that even though the camera requires a battery to use all the shutter speeds 125th of a second all the way to 1/1000th are available for use without a battery. This has got to be the largest range of fail-safe speeds on any camera, a definite plus. By the way, the batteries that are required are two MS-76 and are readily available. None of that mercury battery replacement stuff. But back to the top, we also have the shutter release button surrounded by a lock lever, and the film wind lever and the frame counter. One thing to be aware of, if you happen to press the shutter while the shutter dial is set to automatic and the lens cap is on, the mirror may fail to drop back down into place. To remedy this, just move the shutter dial off of automatic and boom, you are back in business. When you press the shutter halfway, the camera meter will activate. If you want the meter to stay activated, just pull the wind lever out to the pre-advanced position. Over on the left shoulder of the camera, we have the film rewind lever and back latch. Over on the side below the rewind lever, you'll find two PC sockets, one for X-Sync and one for FP. On the back of the camera, just below the rewind lever, is the battery check button and light. On the front right of the camera, below the nameplate, you'll find the depth of field preview button and the self-timer switch. On the lens mount is where you'll find that unique film speed setting dial along with the exposure compensation dial. And this is where the trouble resides. The exposure compensation dial is controlled by these two tabs, one on either side of the mount. It's easy to grab those and make adjustments and think incorrectly that you're setting the film speed. The film speed is controlled by another lever on the bottom left of the lens mount. To set the film speed, first make sure that the exposure compensation dial is set to 1. Then, while depressing the film speed lever, turn the knurled ring until the speed matches the film you're using. The film speed range, by the way, is 8 to 6400. The lens release button is also here under the self timer. Over on the left side of the lens mount is where the mirror lockup lever is. In the viewfinder, focusing is aided by a central microprism spot, although a split image screen is also available. Over on the right, you'll see the range of shutter speeds. In automatic mode, the green indicator will line up with the word auto, and the needle will point to the shutter speed being used. In manual mode, the green indicator will point to your chosen shutter speed, and the needle will point to the correct shutter speed. To achieve an accurate exposure, just change apertures or shutter speeds so that both indicators align. And that's about it. Pretty simple. Let's go shoot some film. I'm out here today with the Pentax K2 camera. I am at Starr's Mill, which is near Fayetteville, Georgia. I've never been here. Heard it was pretty cool, so I'm going to see what we can find here. I've got a few rolls of Kentmere 100 rolled up. Also have some Tri-X in case I need some 400 speed. When I left the house today, the skies were clear, and now they've sort of clouded up, so I may end up changing to 400 at some point. But let's go see what we can find here at Starr's Mill. So to begin with, I'm just going to shoot it on aperture priority, just to check out how that system works. I may switch to manual at some point, we'll see. But starting off just with automatic. Right now it's telling me at f8, be 1/125th of a second at f8. I'm getting a lot of sky in this shot since it's overcast on that side. I'm going to switch to manual mode just so I can bracket a bit. So that's telling me 1/125th of a second at f8. I'm going to put it on a wide angle. I think I'll go with a 24. All right, the meter says 1/250th of a second at f5.6. Let's give it just a little bit more exposure, just in case. Again, f8 at 1/125th of a second. 1/60th of a second at f5.6. Still got the 24mm on. I'm hoping I can get a roll of film out of this. I need to get my creativity flowing. Yeah, so this is interesting. I've got this grass here in the foreground. Shooting across the spillway. I really want to be over on the other side. So, but there's only 1 or 2 shots that I think I can get from there, but it's the shot that I want. In the meantime, let's swap over to the 135. See if I can get some close-ups of the water in the rocks right here in the shallows. The sky is really disappointing me at this point because it was nice and blue and clear when I left. And now it's gray and overcast. But that's November weather for you. At least I'm out here in short sleeves and not a parka. All right, f5.6.
1/125th of a second. Go for some shallower depth of field. Let's open it wide open. Meter's telling me 1/500th of a second at f2.8. Let's just see. Let's close down to f4 and go to 1/250th of a second. Shooting out across here. There's sort of a little path of water that goes out through there and back around. Now let's go with a deeper depth of field this time. We're going 1/60th of a second at f11. And I know I said I was going to shoot some on aperture priority mode, so I'm going to put it back on that. Okay, it's an interesting angle. We got some backlight. It's cool. Let's open up to f2.8. It says 1/500th of a second at 2.8. I've got some nice backlight here, but since it does have some backlight, I'm also going to cheat this a little with some manual exposure just to bracket. We are getting some light back up here. We're getting some backlight. Maybe the sun will peek out a bit. All right, so I put the 50mm back on because I need the 1.4 aperture. There's some pulleys and old machinery underneath the mill here, and we're in very good shade. And I don't know if 100 speed film is going to cut it, but let's just see what we can do. We'll shoot at f2. And let's see what 1/30th of a second does. Oh, it's about right, according to this meter. Now, is it accurate or not? I guess that will be what we'll have to see. And am I going to be able to hold it still enough at 1/30th of a second? We've got these jacks underneath this place supporting it. I don't know how old this thing is. It's old. All right, let's see. You have 1.4, 1/30th of a second. Hold my breath. It's into that roll. Swap out the roll. I'm definitely going to put the 400 speed in though, if I'm going to stay under this, get a few more shots, which I think I will. All right, got my Tri-X in now. Let's see what we can do. Slightly different angle, got a little bit different lighting. Oh, I like this a lot. Got one little bright spot of sun peeking in under the side, and I don't want that in the frame. Let's move along, see what else. Right, I've got the 24mm back on, so I'm gonna get some overall shots of the entire structure. And with this 24 on, I can get all of it from where I'm standing. Or from right here. I do wish the sun were out, but I mean, it is what it is. Using aperture priority. So let's see, at f8, it's telling me 1/500, well, between 1/250th and 1/500th of a second. Let's change off of aperture priority because I don't know how much I trust that. At least in manual mode, I can bracket. So we're looking at f11 at 1/250th of a second. So yeah, so this is the angle that I was looking for. So we got a nice shot of it through here, a nice shot of the reservoir, and we actually even see that the name of the building is Stars Mill, so that at least lets us know where we are. There's also a couple of shots I want to get down from the bottom of the spillway shooting across, where the water comes over, wide angle. I am going to swap over to the 50 for a couple of shots, and then I'm going to put at least the 28 millimeter on to get the wider shots that I'm looking for. Probably finish up the rest of the roll right here. All right, let's move to manual. 1/250th of a second at f8. Don't want to get much sky in there because it's just bald. There's nothing exciting about that. Now we got some geese over here coming to check me out, see what I'm up to. If I brought anything to feed them, which I have not. But they make a nice little addition to the subject. Nice little addition to the shot. Since they're so close, I should put the 135 on and take advantage of that. Wish I had brought the 70 to 210 f4 that I have, but I thought, nah, there's no reason I'll need that. We actually have a little bit of sun now, so hopefully it'll hang out enough for me to get a few shots. I've got the 28 millimeter on. I think the 24 would just be a little too much. Nice. This is looking all right. All right, so let's see. Let's go f16. Or let's go f11. It was f11 at 1/250th of a second. I've got this boulder here in the front. Got a little bit of blue sky peeking out there. Goose proudly on display. I like it that we're getting a little blue sky in the clouds back there. Let's do something really shallow depth of field with this bush here. A little bit of shallowness otherwise, because I've got 400 speed filming here, right? Now I'm going to focus back on the mill and have this shrub out of focus. All right, I still have the 28 millimeter on. Got a new roll of Kentmere 100 in. I'm going to go for some relative depth. So it's f11 at 1/60th of a second. Go 1/30th of a second. Couple of verticals here. F8 at 1/60th of a second. This probably would be really nice for color. So I'm going to go back to this, because now that we have some nice directional light on it, let's go f4 at 1/60th of a second at 2.8 still. This has got some cool light on it, so I'm glad I got that. If I were to put the 135 on, that would force me to look at it a little bit differently. Let's do it. All right, so let's do 1/60th of a second This is going to be fairly tight on one particular spot of this. So let's go 2.8 at 1/60th of a second, and that's just marginally going to give me a decent exposure. Marginally. Everything I'm shooting is 1/60th of a second at 2.8. Got a few more shots. All right, let's see what's gonna happen here. I can go fairly super shallow depth of field with this. 1/1000th of a second at f2. So I'm getting this shrub here in sharp focus, and the mill in the back is going to be soft. Try a vertical. Let's wind the film first. It always helps. Have that over to one side. All right, so let's reverse that. Soft in the foreground. And that is the roll. So all I had to do really was to get in the right spot, which was over on this side. Got the creativity flowing a little bit. All right, so we're going to go back and process the film, look at the results, and do the wrap up. I'll see you back at the house.
You know, it's unfortunate that the K2 had a rather undeservedly short lifespan. And why is that? Well, a couple of years prior, Olympus introduced the OM1, which was one of the smallest 35mm SLRs ever produced at that point, and still today. And all of a sudden, smaller was better. The K2, on the other hand, was about the same size as the Spotmatic series that came before it. It was big, and big was out of fashion. So after only a year, these early K-Series cameras were pushed aside to make way for the Pentax M-Series, cameras that would give the Olympus OM1 a good run for its money. One K-Series camera, however, survived many years afterwards. Of course, I'm talking about the famous K1000, which is a pretty low-spec camera when compared to the K2, but on eBay they're running about the same price. Today, I don't think we're as concerned with camera size as they were back in the mid-70s. Smaller was fashionable then, and everything was being shrunken down. In the US, our cars were huge. Then the oil crisis hit, and everybody was scrambling to build smaller ones to compete with the Japanese imports. It was not a high mark in US automotive history. Just Google Chevrolet Monza, and you'll see what I mean. But this Pentax K2, very nice camera, even with its odd film speed dial it handles well. And the ability to use several shutter speeds without a battery is really nice. Pair it with a few nice SMC Takamar lenses and you've got a nice combination. So that wraps it up for this episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please leave a like if so and consider subscribing to the channel. I would certainly appreciate it, and as always, I love to read and respond to all your comments, so don't hold back there either. I'll see you next time.